Hi everyone, Dr. Suneel Dhand, internal medicine physician. Welcome to another video. I want to share with you a very interesting experience I recently had in the hospital where a patient told me an unbelievable story. I was treating a patient who was in the hospital with an acute illness, and unfortunately his acute illness, like many acute illnesses presenting to the hospital, was a result of chronic illness building up over a number of years due to a poor lifestyle. And this gentleman, he was very learned, very educated actually, he was a professional, and he understood that he had been making some poor choices for a long time, which had led to this situation, primarily poor dietary choices. And as with a lot of these types of patients, even though I'm in the hospital, I like to have a discussion about better lifestyle choices. And what I was saying was really resonating with him, and he said he really wanted to make some changes, primarily with regards of switching to a more real food diet and eliminating ultra-processed foods and sugars. And we talked about how the modern day food environment has become very toxic. It's almost a default to get sucked into bad choices. In fact, it is the default for most people. And he told me an interesting story because we talked about how the medical profession is often ignorant until it's way too late with regards to promoting the correct choices and decisions for most people. And he told me that he remembered a story back in the 1970s when he was a young boy and he was at a doctor's office and he had some type of wound. He was having his dressing changed, and while he was changing the dressing, the doctor was also puffing a cigarette, believe it or not, and he was puffing cigarette smoke into his face. And he remembers coughing and not really liking it, and the doctor said, "Oh, don't worry about it, it's okay, I'll be done soon," while he was smoking a cigarette in the patient's face. Think about that. That is how things were in the 1960s, 70s, and even 1980s. Many of you watching may remember those days, but for many people watching, you will find this unbelievable. How was the medical profession so ignorant, so completely ignorant for so long, because it took decades for the dangers of cigarette smoking to really be taken on board and for doctors to discourage cigarette smoking despite repeated warnings. In fact, back in the 1960s and 70s, it wasn't uncommon for cigarettes to be given out to hospital patients and for doctors to routinely be smoking on ward rounds and even in clinics as they saw patients. Many people watching, I'm sure, still remember those days. Now, it is often said that history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And where this links into my bigger point is that I believe that we're in the same situation now, not with cigarettes, but with our food environment, specifically ultra-processed foods and sugars. There is a complete ignorance right now from the medical profession, just as there is in society in general. But of course, society isn't going to change unless the medical profession starts talking about just how dangerous our food environment is. And think about this right now. Routinely in hospitals, patients are given the most horrible foods. Patients who are inflamed, many of them will have type 2 diabetes, are given pancakes, muffins, highly processed foods, an unacceptable carbohydrate load. And even aside from what patients are given, you walk into a hospital and you will routinely see donuts laid out at nurses' stations, even in doctors' offices. It's okay, it's completely harmless, just as having one cigarette was viewed as harmless a few decades ago. People did it in hospitals. Nowadays, even in hospitals, vending machines are routinely there, stationed all over the place, where people can buy junk food, they can buy Coca-Cola. Many hospitals have contracts with Coca-Cola. Think about that. This reflects the wider ignorance in society about our food environment, which is making so many people sick. And myself and that patient, coming back to the story, when my patient told me that story, we were linking it to the current ignorance of how ultra-processed food is given a complete pass. Food which is making people very inflamed, very sick. I am certain that in a few generations' time, hopefully sooner, we will view ultra-processed foods the same way that we view cigarette smoking now. Future, more enlightened generations will look back and think, was it really true that in hospitals we were giving patients pancakes, muffins, really processed carbohydrates, we were giving them sodas, we were giving oncology patients candies in infusion clinics? This will all be viewed as completely and utterly unacceptable. But the medical profession does have a reputation, sadly, of being ignorant until it's too late. The medical establishment for a long time was ignoring the warnings on smoking and how dangerous it was, and we're in the same situation now with our food environment. And I'm actually sad to say that if you look back, you will find that the medical profession and establishment in general was being bought out by tobacco companies, by big tobacco, and you have a similar situation now with big food, big pharma, and other vested interests. History doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it does rhyme. All you have to do is read the history books, and I actually think that the environment we're in now is far worse than smoking in many ways. Think about it. Nowadays, some of the most soaring, exploding conditions in teenagers, adolescents, are type 2 diabetes and fatty liver disease. This is going to be devastating in a few years' time for an entire generation. At least with smoking, it took a few decades often for the health problems to manifest, but with sugar and ultra-processed foods, people are consuming unacceptable amounts of these foods, which would have been unthinkable a few generations ago. The health problems manifest much faster. So I really do believe, and I'm happy to debate anybody on this, that sugar and ultra-processed foods are a way worse problem right now for society than cigarette smoking ever was. So medical establishment, medical profession, wake up to this, because you're doing the same thing as that doctor did to my patient in the 1970s. Puffing cigarette smoke right in their face. Thanks everyone for watching. Feel free to comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. Check out my free newsletters and my uncensored platform. Those links are down below. Hit the like button if you like this video and the bell button for more similar videos in the future. That really helps with the algorithm and getting these videos shared as widely as possible. We will speak again very soon.